Good afternoon. How are you? Well, it's a sunny Sunday, but it's a little more breezy. It's a little chillier, 55 degrees, going downward. But it's nice out. It's always nice to have sun at your back. I've been watching, well, I should say I've been listening to the talking heads in the background while I'm doing other things. Chores with the animals, things, organizing files, really exciting stuff. But I have some pretty strong opinions about some of the goings on. One of the factors in the argument about the prosecution in the Manhattan DA's office is, hey, the feds didn't do anything, they passed over this. And that's not even close to the facts. The facts are that no less than A.G. Barr, the slinkiest lower dog on the chain of servants, lapdogs that do what Trump wants, basically leaned on the Southern District to prevent any mention of Trump in connection with the Cohen payoff to the gals that were, shall we say, friends of Mr. Trump at an inconvenient time toward the end of the campaign. And the only way to make it go away with, well, in a secretive fashion, was to pay $130,000 and then to clean up how that money was being passed. Okay. But what we learned today on the Talking Heads, which was news to me, if any of you knew this before, was Vance was on the air, the former district attorney, and he spoke about the prosecution involving Cohen. And when Vance was the DA, he had an investigation going of Cohen and these payoffs. And he was asked by the Justice Department, in obviously a strong enough fashion to defer to them, and they basically said they wanted him to pass, his office to pass on that case, as if they were going to do it. But plainly, given the history, they planned not to do it, and they didn't want then Trump as president to be subject to this accusation. And yet today, people keep talking both sides of this issue, and this is what drives me crazy, saying, well, you can't indict a sitting president. Well, that's bullshit. That's not in the Constitution. And the Department of Justice has its own self-saving provisions as an institution to protect whomever's in that institution, headed by the way, the president, whomever it is, the chief executive officer, whoever it is. But the real reason, even if one wanted to assert that reason, the real reason was that they wanted to protect Trump, and so they didn't want Trump to be found anywhere in the Cohen case, although he was found in the indictment as a person who had done the deed with Cohen. Now, rush forward. So on this weekend, on this Sunday, this very day, Vance talks about it and says he was told not to act upon it, and he didn't. And some say, well, what about the time after that? I only want to introduce hypotheticals about why that's true. But one of them that concerns me is that the same personnel that did nothing when compelled to do nothing persist in the office. They decide consistency was more important, time mattered, he was out of, I don't know what they decided, and apparently no one's talking about that. So when people say, oh, we didn't indict him then because he was president, that's not it. We didn't indict him, the president, then because he was president and his principal lapdog, Barr, intimidated the Southern District and directed them not to do anything, up to and including firing the U.S. Attorney, Berman. So that's the background on that. But nobody ever pushes back on it. And I don't get it. I mean, is there an agreement on a stylized story that the public is supposed to hear rather than the truth? Or the details from which you could draw your own opinion? Now, This little segment that I've just improvised is a predicate to a second level of disappointment, anger, for the failure to scrutinize what these people say when they come on the air. From the beginning, the principal problem with Barr has been people so presumed he was a good person, ethical, virtuous, that they never scrutinized what he was doing, including how he buried the Mueller report with a bullshit memo of several pages that Mueller had written back to him about that concerned him. But we never knew from the beginning that these guys had constructed a situation in which the president was never going to be prosecuted, although we went around talking about the great militarist, man of war, now a prosecutor, unflinching, who was going to bring down the president, which never was conceivable or to happen. So these guys, they played this fantasy, including the defense counsel, who knew what was going on. And we, the people, were the last to hear about it. Okay, so we have Barr on TV today, and he's shaking his head like he was the Virgin Mary. Maybe that's more appropriate than I realize, because he's ascended into heaven, plainly, the Republican heaven, and he comes on the air and he talks about, I don't know about this investigation. I don't know about this prosecution. Oh, it strikes me wrong. From the lead fixer when Trump was president, he's still doing it, and this time he's doing it to the case in the Bronx. So, when you consider that he is the guy who fired Berman, who wouldn't do what he wanted to do to bury references to Trump in connection with the Cohen case, he's some guy to come forward now and tell the nation on TV on Sunday in the non-thinking heads section that, oh, this is terrible. This is really terrible. And America doesn't get the other story. The hosts don't say, oh, by the way, aren't you the one who screwed this up? Berman wrote a whole book about it. What do you say about that? They'd rather have the guest on than embarrass him. And that's wrong. And since I was a kid, it's the reason I've been interested in corruption cases. In my first appearance while I was in high school, a friend of mine who is the son of an assemblyman in the Bronx asked me if I wanted to be on a show. And I said, yeah. And so I studied up about the guest, and then I took him on my maiden appearance on TV in New York. And he flummoxed, and he got upset, and he didn't have any answers. And so a street kid from the Bronx in a suit took him to task. Needless to say, I was never invited back to that show. But I persist in the view that what's the point of having interview shows if you don't have a real interview, if you don't ask them the tough questions? Now, maybe enough people would stay away, then you have to hold the show on recipes and cooking things instead of cooking up lies, cooking up cover-ups, getting away with it because we're intimidated by a system that is a grand maw that requires guests and information to flow through the cameras and through the airwaves into our homes and our heads. So, now, I think that the test of a civilization is whether we scrutinize the toadies of Trump or those who see advantage in standing by him, even if he were to take a baseball bat to a 7-year-old in the street. And I'm not talking about his gun policies. I'm talking metaphorically about what is the dimension beyond which a Republican these days would take Trump to task. And I don't know what it is. There doesn't appear to be any. And, they always talk about Bragg, he crossed the Rubicon when he brought this case. Well, a little bit of history from a guy who studied Latin and enjoyed it about Caesar. You know what crossing the Rubicon was? You didn't cross the Rubicon with arms because that would be an act against the Republic. And Caesar was thought of as a dictator. The person who crossed the Rubicon, that was Trump on January the 6th, if not before that. And he crossed the Rubicon and he got stuck in the waters of the river. And he's still trying to figure out a way to turn that whirlpool into a path back to the White House, where he could pardon himself perhaps and everybody else. And I think that's a long reach. But you know, America has to understand that this is the narrative in that crazy man's head. The man-child Trump, his accidency, doesn't give a damn about the republic, doesn't give a damn about democracy, doesn't care about anyone else, except to continue the power that he wielded badly, and perhaps luckily badly, in the sense that he never fully understood what the power of the presidency was about. So he crossed the Rubicon. My final thought on this subject is, we are not talking about a partisan attack. The case, and forgive me for repeating myself, but the case involves $130,000. It involves multiple frauds, misdemeanor or otherwise, which means if you have 30 times 1, it's 30 years, but that's not what they give him. But it is a fact that repeated offenses, misdemeanor or felony, can win you a special spot in the sentencing game when it's all over. And if the felony is proven, that we're taught is necessary to make this a real punch in the face. Mike Tyson said that wakes you up. That makes it real. And this is a punch in the face to Trump. And we're going to see how much of his faux masculinity is on demonstration on Tuesday or Monday night, when he could be in town and have a rally on Fifth Avenue. So this is not partisan. This offense committed by a Democrat or Republican would still be an offense. The motivation to bring it, I would argue, is the corrective of the former Attorney General Barr, who did everything he could to defeat it. And now it's back again. And so he's back on the payroll. He gets a book out of it. He gets to go on TV and still defend Trump, so he can have it both ways with Trump. He keeps open his options, and we let him do it. Wrong. So anyhow, that's what I got this Sunday. And here I am on this slightly chilly day in my cathedral of trees, thinking about Manchin, who wants to destroy the environment because he's a fossil fool of the first order, and he's a profiteer receiving funds from this industry, and he doesn't want us to do anything with any of those cleaner environmental energy sources. So, and he's thinking of running for president. How about that? As an independent, so he could take votes again from Biden and perhaps help Trump or whomever else the Republican is. Enough for now. Bye-bye.